In this video, we're going to cover the 8.6 core module release. This is an extender box for the SC controller line, and you can tell by the pictures of all the inputs and outputs, we're going to go over all those individually. But included in the box is a 5-volt power supply, 2 male DB9 adapters, 1 female adapter, and 4 Phoenix connectors. Now this box does count as an extender, so it adheres to whatever limits the master controller has. Alright, let's get into the connections. This features 2 fully pinned RS-232 serial ports. Now this is new. Each one of these ports can be set to null in the configurator, so no null adapter is required. 2 notes on this. HAI thermostats, you need to change the COM device to 1200 baud from the 500. The SC1 is not supported on this device. So if you have one of those, make sure that it is connected to the master controller. Alright, so the next connectors are for the RS-485. There's 2 full and half duplex ports. These are compatible with all the standard 485 devices that we control today. And next are the IR outputs. So 4 12-volt IR outputs that are compatible with the Xantec dual-headed emitters. And next we have 2 signal inputs. Now these are new for ELAN. They will detect voltage from 12 to 5 volts DC and 24 volts AC. These are new for ELAN, and they will replace the classic sense inputs. If we take a look at how to wire them, now this is included with the manual for the IO200. One piece of advice: if you're going to wire a doorbell, don't wire it like this, because this will just give it 24 volts AC all the time. So you kind of have to wire it in series. Next are the relays. So 2 relays, and now these can be wired as normally opened or normally closed. And they handle 24 volts AC or DC and up to 1 amp max. These have been upgraded from the SC controllers, as they will not revert on a reboot. Next is the Ethernet connection. This does support PoE, but it also has Wi-Fi. But if you are going to connect it via Wi-Fi, you need to connect it hardwired first, and then in the configurator, turn the Wi-Fi on and set it up there. The next is the power input if you're not using PoE, and the reset button. Now, all the configuration for this device is stored in the master controller, not the device itself. So the only reset is if you press and hold it for 5 seconds, you'll set it back to a DHCP network address. Do note that will also set it back to the wired connection. So you'll have to connect it hardwired and set it up again. On the front, there is an LED, and it sticks to our standard coloring practices. So blue is powered on, connected, and all good to go. Flashing blue is connected to the network, but not connected to the controller. And amber is powered on, not connected to the network. Then next we get to our flagship controller, the SC300, which will replace the SC10. Well, what's included in the box is the power supply, a Wi-Fi antenna, the rack ears, 7 male DB9 adapters, 3 female DB9 adapters, and 10 Phoenix connectors. So let's go ahead and look at all the individual ports on this guy. So first is the RS-232. Just like the SC10, it has 8 of them. These, like the IO200, are null modem configurable. 2 RS-485s, both full and half duplex, exactly the same as the IO200. And then 12 IR ports. Again, these are 12 volt and support the dual-headed Xantec emitters. And next we have 4 of the signal inputs. These are just like the IO200. They detect between 5 and 12 volts DC and 24 volts AC. They do replace the classic sense input. There again is how to wire for certain things. And relays. Again, exactly the same as the IO200. 6 relays that can be configured as normally opened or normally closed. 24 volts, AC, DC, and up to 1 amp max is what they can handle. These also have been upgraded as they will not revert on a reboot. This controller also features one audio output. Even though it's two RCAs, they are left and right. It is still one audio output. These are currently for door chimes. Next is USB. So there are two USBs on this device. One is a USB 2.0 and one is a USB 3.0. Right now, you can use a USB 2.0 for the Z-Wave antenna. This controller also features an HDMI output. So it's a 1.4B connection, and currently it is used for OSD. And the Ethernet port. So this device does feature a PoE compatible gigabit port. And here's your Wi-Fi antenna connection. And here is your external power supply if you're not using PoE, as well as the reset button. The reset button will do the same exact functions as the SC100. 2-second press will reset back to DHCP. A 20-second press will clear the programming. And a 20-second press and hold while powering up will perform the factory default. On the front, you have a power button and you have an LED indicator. These functions are the same exact as the current SC100. So next in Core Module 8.6, we are releasing our native Z-Wave support. Now this is for the SC100 and SC300 controller only, and it is only available on the master controller. So if you have an SC10 as a master and an SC100 as the extender, Z-Wave will not work that way. So the Z-Wave antenna must be connected to the master controller, which must be an SC100 or an 300. You will also need the Z-Wave antenna, which is EL-SC-ZW. We support 50 devices connected, and standard range for Z-Wave applies. Now, what is new on this is how to include or exclude nodes on the Z-Wave. So now you can do that from the viewer. So if you go in the configurator and set up the antenna, you'll then have an option to show in the viewer, and that will let you go in and add or exclude a device. Now, one cool thing is, and we'll get to this in a minute, is if it is a light device, you'll see we actually let you add the area where it might be. This will dramatically speed up deployment of a lighting system, and you'll see that when we get to the lighting section. Now, you can also include or exclude nodes from the configurator. So this is a screenshot of what that would look like, but there's a couple things in here that you can only do in the configurator. One of the options is to set up Smart Start, and we do support Smart Start. That's DSK. So if you have that code from a new device, you can enter it in the configurator. Then when you take the device out and install it, it'll already be set up. So if you haven't used Smart Start, it's a really helpful thing for deploying a Z-Wave network, especially a new Z-Wave network. Another option that's only available in the configurator is adding an S2, and that's a security level device like a door lock. And note that the Vera only supports S0 devices, and you lost the PIN code. So when you add an S2 device, it'll ask you for a PIN code, which is included with the device. But if you're like me and you threw these away, you have no other option. So they're included with a new device. But if you're using the Vera, you might have thrown those away. And sometimes they're inside the device itself. But we have this way here that you can actually add it as an S0 device like the Vera if you lost that PIN code. But that's only available from the configurator. There's a lot of other options in the configurator. We just talked about adding and excluding devices, but these are all covered in detail in the integration note. All right. The next thing that 8.6 gives us is a huge update to the lighting system. Adding lighting was one of those things that was a little tough when setting up a new network. A lot of guys created custom pages and they just use those over and over again. We decided to make a lighting interface that would auto-generate based on the location, and we'll cover that in a minute. A couple other things it does is it gives you a filter for light and shade support, so you can flick between the two. We do have some new support for scenes. I'll cover that. We also have controls for RGB and W, as well as RGBW presets, as well as a few new custom controls. Now, custom pages are still operable as they were before. All right, so the first thing to set this up is you have to tell a load what area it's in. So in the configurator, you will see a new box that says location. And if you click on the three dots, you'll get the menu to be able to add an area. So you can see it expanded. We have a building, a level, and an area selection. You would hit the plus sign to add something to those. And then if it already exists, if you already added, for instance, kitchen, you could then just drop the box down and select kitchen. You don't have to add it again. So it's just adding them and then assigning them to the load. There is a new configuration option under each load in the configurator called device classification. Now, as you can see, a couple options are a light and a shade simple, and undefined. Light is going to be the most common thing. Now, we use this specific setting for filtering the loads between shades and lights. Now, once you set up an area, you have to push it over to the viewer in the standard way you would push over a custom page. All right, so let's go over how this works. So right here, this is the master control. So this will show you the areas that you have. This will show you the areas you have viewable. And if you take a look on the left, you see that light icon. Now, two of them are blue and two of them are not blue. That will show you if a load in that area is on or not. That will also toggle all the loads in the area. So if I was to press that next to kitchen, it would turn all the loads off. And if I was to press it next to family room, it would turn all the loads on. So that's an icon, but it is also a button. So next, let's talk about the slider. So the slider controls the loads associated with the area in relative fashion, not absolute. So for instance, maybe there's 5 loads in the kitchen. If I set 3 of them on and 2 of them off, if I move the master slider up, the loads that are on will increase. The loads that are off will stay off. Now the reason for that is scene control. So if I have a scene in the same thing where it turns on a couple loads, I can increase or decrease that scene without modifying the loads that are off. Now, if the room was off and I slid them up, it will then control all the loads underneath that area. Toggle loads, and we'll talk about these in a minute. Toggle loads will only turn on when you move the slider up to 100 or down to 0, as they do not have anything in between. Plus and minus is for fine control of the slider, but it does operate in the same way as the slider. Now, increasing the area, you'll see the loads associated, and you can see that the master slider will show relative amounts of light in the room, like how much is on. If I look at this, I have 3 on at full and 3 off. So that is why that slider is at 50%, or how it relates to the amount of lights in a room. Next, we're going to get to the favorite icon, the star. So when you hit that, it'll bring up the scenes that are available, as well as the ability to manage the scenes, as well as the color palette if there are color options in that area. Let's talk about the scenes first. So if I hit manage scenes, I'll have the option to create a new scene, and that is a new feature for us. The end user will have the ability to create a new scene on the fly, to rename it, to edit it, or to delete it. Now, to edit it, if you take a look to the right screen, you will see this scene. And something else that's new for us, now we have the ability to define color within a scene. All right, let's move over to the color selection. So we pre-generate 16 color palettes by default, which makes it really quick to be able to select the color that you used often. Turns out to be pretty handy. Now this will affect all color loads in that area. And if you hit manage color, you will see you have the option to go to colors, where you can slide the RGB slider, or whites, where you can select the Kelvin level. The other bar in color is the saturation level. If you want to save a color that's not in our preset color selection, you can do so. Set the color, then hit save, and then select one of the presets to overwrite. So 16 is a constant value that will always show, and it is global. So if you have different areas with different loads, they'll show the same colors available. All right, so let's take a look at when you expand it from the master level into the detailed level. So you can see in this area, I have one of the loads has a circle, right? That is a color load. And that circle will show the color if the light was on at that time. All right, so let's show the expanded view of a area. So this will show all the loads that are available to that area or assigned to that area, and they'll work the same way. So you can individually turn on a load as well as individually dim a load with the plus and minus to finally define their value. Now, if an individual load has a color option, you can define that separately by clicking that round button and then get those same options that you saw in the favorite icon. Now, if that load was on, it would then light up with the color. So that circle would be whatever color it is, maybe blue, maybe white, it would show. Now, if you look at the bottom of this list, sign, the load of sign has no plus and minus. That is because it is not dimmable. That is a toggle only load. So you can turn it on or off. And if you turn it on, the whole bar will show up. That way there, when you're looking at it, you can see which loads are on easily from that same area where you would dim them. But you cannot actually, there is no slider and there is no plus and minus to control that load, as it is not a dimmable load. All right, next we're going to talk about the shade filter. So again, if you set the device classification to shade basic, which is just up, stop, or down, some shades do not support values, or shade, which that would show the slider control. So that would, if you want to set it to 86%, you could do that. Now there is a master control. If you have a bunch of shades under kitchen, you can slide that master control and it will control all the shades associated with the kitchen. It also has the scenes. I can set a scene for shades in the same fashion I would do for lights. All right, there's been some additions here for custom controls. For guys that like to create custom pages, we still allow you to do that, of course, but now with some more controls. Since we added Kelvin control, we gave you a Kelvin slider, and you can add that to a page if you want to make it. We also gave you a saturation slider, so you can use that as well. We also gave you a new control called multi-control. The idea here is, in an area you might have lots of different types of loads. They might not all have Kelvin or color, but instead of creating these pages that have all these different sliders on them, it's basically one control that if you press it, it'll turn on. If you press it, it'll turn off. And if you press the bulb to the right, you'll pop up the screen that will show what values that load has to control. So for instance, canopy has brightness, Kelvin, color, and saturation, where island just has brightness control. And it makes creating custom pages with multiple different types of controls much cleaner. All right, the next enhancement that we have is to the settings pages. Now, this has been a long time request. We took a lot of the settings, a lot of the non-permission settings, and put them right under the gear from the main page. So when you hit settings, before you get a passcode, you will get this option, and you can set alarms, set the schedule, set the intercom settings, and the TV channel groups, and the theme. And then if you want those sensitive controls that require a passcode, that's under advanced. So that is password protected, and that's how you set the permissions for somebody to enter the system. But these other settings are just all under the global settings now. We added a new theme, a new live theme. It's called Gold Dust. We also added a new theme selector. So this will show you what your actual screen will look like on that specific theme. And this is operates a little bit faster than the old one. We also added a way to replace the star icon from a favorite. Before 8.6, we had a star icon that would show as a favorite. But if you want to replace that with the cover art, you can. So if you're on any station that's a favorite, you press and hold the cover art that's playing right at that time, you'll get an option to save. Now, you can see from the image, the way we had it before was just a star, and you can still keep that. But if you want to replace it, if you look on the one to the left, that is not a star. That was a cover art that I press and held and hit save. The next enhancement is to the climate scheduler. So before we had a bunch of up and down arrows to change the time and the set points. We now have what I call the roly scrolly, which you can now just slide around to pick the time instead of going through the arrows. We also modified the restore function for the SC100 specifically. If the SC100 has an SW-100-Pro license on it, you can now restore a backup from an SC10 or 2. Prior to 8.6, it would not let you do that. Another enhancement is an individual event map disable. So you can still disable all event maps, but having the ability to disable individual event maps will help with troubleshooting. There's been a KNX update, so we added some values that you can use here, and we added a new enhancement around dynamic source favorites management. So what this does is if you have a 3-stream player, just say, and you want to save a favorite, now you have to save it from which stream you want. So that can get really messy when you're storing all of them, especially if you have like a 5-zone player. You'd have to store them all from each of the different options. That can take up your entire screen. So what we did, so when I hit a favorite, if the zone is already on and it's on player A, it'll just stay with player A. But if it's off and player A is being used in another room, it will then select the unused player first. So if player B is free, it will then pick player B instead of player A. That is only on the zone on, but that will greatly reduce how many favorites you need to store in your source select page. There has been some surveillance updates. Mobile exporting is now supported. Of course, it requires the app update. We also enhanced the remote video connection. So you should experience better performance, for instance, when you're answering a door station remotely. And there's been a bunch of efficiency improvements here. Drivers, my favorite subject. So we have a bunch of updates to drivers, as well as some new drivers. Updates. To go along with our lighting updates, we've also updated Philips Hue. So in 8.6, you will have to update the driver and then click Discover Devices, and that'll go through and update all the lights, use our new controls to their full advantage. We also added scene importing. We did an update to Cool Master. You could see that picture on the right. We added swing modes. There's an update to MusicCast that corrects some searching and service menu access. We made an update to Texacom, which will add the outputs as well as the key press controls. HDL, which added support for a new shade motor. iAqualink 2. This was actually in a .18 build, but it's now rolled into our main release, and that is to support the Jandy new backend. Sonos, this one was also in the .20 branch, but since this is a major release, it's now rolled into that as well. And that does fix some of the changes that Sonos had made to their latest firmware. There's been some updates to the Tapco driver, polling improvements and such. And finally, the Alexa skill now holds international support and the new driver. So Lutron QSX with catcher support is now supported. Now with that, there is new support for the Ratu Select, Caseta, and Athena control. Now with Caseta, this does also support the consumerly purchased products, like from Home Depot. 2 new beta drivers that are available in the core. You have to check on unsupported, but you'll have Lipix, I think that's how it's said. That's a light control, as well as FX Luminaire. That's the Luxor outdoor lighting. That is also in beta. And finally, we get to the CER fixes. These are the field reported fixes that we've gone through and changed. And these are also found in the release notes, the What's New doc. Don't forget to check out the device integration notes for the new devices, as well as the video notes. Well, guys, thanks a lot. And if you have any questions, please reach out to your local RTS or sales.